Hello and welcome to History 7. In today's episode you can find out how famous poet Edgar Allan Poe died. The greatest and probably most troublesome poet of his time, Edgar Allan Poe, was born on 19th January 1809 in Boston, Massachusetts, the creator of the simultaneously romantic and ghostly poem Raven, perhaps the most shocking poetic dedication to lost love, and prose works such as Black Cat, Stolen Letter, The Fall of the House of Usher, and Murders on Morgue Street, built on the effects of horror, tension, and overemphasized sensory sensations, is inscribed in the register as Edgar Poe. He lost his parents early on, so the Allan family took care of him. As he was never legally adopted, he took the surname Allan as his middle name. He entered the United States Army at the age of 18 and, after 3 years, enrolled in West Point, a military institution for officer training. He only lasted for a brief period before being ejected for disciplinary reasons, following which he relocated to Baltimore and began literary publicist work. Tamerlane and Other Poems, his first book of poems, was self-published. After earning $50 for his short tale Message in a Bottle, he embarks on a writing career. He edited and published periodicals, authored reviews, articles, poetry, and short tales, and delivered lectures. He was perpetually on the verge of poverty, and he exacerbated his severe despair with booze and narcotics. The restless poet secretly married his own cousin Virginia Clemm, who was only 13 at the time, when he was 26. Of course, the marriage was miserable. Mrs. Poe died in this valley of tears when she was just 24 years old, from tuberculosis. Annabel Lee is a poem dedicated to her. The date was September 27, 1849, when Poe was scheduled to fly from Richmond to Philadelphia to assist a colleague in editing some sonnets. Instead of the city of brotherly love, he found himself in Baltimore. Nobody knows how he got there, but when he was discovered, he was in critical condition. He was unconscious and dressed in other people's clothes, laying on a dusty road outside the Gunner's Hall bar. The Good Samaritans rushed him to a neighboring hospital to figure out what had occurred, but Poe was anything but lucid. He spent the last days of his life in a state somewhere between oblivion and defiance, and when he opened his lips, he generally yelled obscenities or gibberish. One thing remained consistent in that hazy state: the name Reynolds. Witnesses stated he did it hundreds of times. It was never known who this man was, if he was a man at all. After 4 days in the hospital, the poet died. Theories concerning his unexplained demise have been accumulating since then. Brain tumors, mercury poisoning, rabies, and even the common flu have been cited as potential reasons for death, but physicians feel none are plausible. It is likely that the damn poet poisoned himself with booze, either unintentionally or on purpose. Everyone was acquainted with his psychosis, suicide attempts, and exaggeration in all kinds of narcotics. But this does not explain how he ended himself in other people's clothes. One theory jumps out as quite credible in a sea of hypotheses. Poe, she claims, was slain. More precisely, he was the victim of an uncommon and terrifying manner of forcing people to vote in 19th century America. Specifically, thugs working for particular parties would approach an individual on the street and pull him to a tiny room. They would compel him to drink or ingest opium to the point of unconsciousness and then force him to slide a voting paper into the ballot box under their observation. If the victim refused to vote, the gang threatened to beat, disfigure, or even murder her. Voters were compelled to vote many times in one day while dressed in different costumes to disguise their identity. Most of the time it was about rags, precisely like the ones Poe was wearing when he was discovered in the embrace of death. This idea also explains the poet's insanity and is strengthened by the fact that the unhappy guy was discovered on election day, in front of the bar that serves as a polling center. That concludes the sad story of Edgar Allan Poe's death. If you want to know more, please subscribe, leave a like, and see you in the next episode of History 7.